Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this is a Ryzen 5 1600 based gaming PC. Although the original 1600 released in 2017, AMD have since quietly launched a new version dubbed the 1600AF, thanks to its slight SKU name change. It's a 12nm part now that's closer in performance to a Ryzen 5 2600, and best of all it costs just £80 here in the UK or $85 US. That is silly money for a 6-core 12-threaded chip, and I mean that in a good way. Today, I thought I'd put together what I feel is a nice budget gaming PC with this 6-core CPU at the centre of it. I had a £450 expenditure limit in mind. So let's take a step back, go through the parts and talk about whether this chip is worth buying in 2020. So first we have the new Ryzen 5 1600 itself, a CPU that Gamers Nexus described as sort of a 2018 Zen Plus part released in 2019. I own the original Ryzen 5 1600 a while back and it was probably one of my favourite chips I've ever owned. In fact, I upgraded my Ryzen 3 1200, another CPU that I really liked, to the Ryzen 5 1600 because at the time I got a pretty good deal on it. I think I paid about £110 for the original Ryzen 5, and when it came to editing and gaming I saw a huge difference in Premiere Pro. Games like Assassin's Creed, for example, that really do enjoy more cores, and it was really a very good upgrade in my opinion, and that was a while ago now. With this new version, according to the benchmarks I've seen on Gamers Nexus, we should see a few more frames in games, and for the price it's currently at, well, it really does sound like a bargain. It now comes with the smaller Wraith Stealth cooler too. Next up we have an ASRock B450M HDV, an entry-level B450 board that supports even the latest chips right out of the box. It's nothing special but it'll get the job done. I like the all black look of it as well. For the memory, whoa, hold that frame right there. Now I almost went with 8GB. I was so close to going with 8GB, and then I thought, well, if you're building a PC for this sort of money, then 16GB for an extra £30 or so would certainly be the better way to go, as you'll see much better performance in games and CPU intensive tasks. Please excuse this screenshot here. I have now upgraded to 16 gigs of the same Patriot Viper memory, although it is 3200 MHz because it was a little cheaper, which is odd. The faster the speed, the cheaper it was. For the storage, I would recommend an SSD, maybe combine a 120 gig SSD for a boot drive and a traditional HDD for games. Personally, I'd just get the biggest SSD you can afford, as the prices have really gone down lately, and you'll certainly have a snappier all-round computing experience. As far as the graphics card goes, well, it had to be the 1650 Super. At £150, the 1650 Super is one of the best budget cards available new right now for a solid 60fps 1080p gaming experience. To power all of this, I've gone for a BeQuiet System Power 9 PSU. These are very well priced. I think brand new it was about £40, and it's a great all-round unit that will run most single cards out there with ease, the 1650 Super being no trouble at all. There aren't many reviews out there, but BeQuiet are a very well-known and reliable brand, and I've used plenty of their power supplies in the past with no trouble. The case I went for is basic looking, I know, but it does have RGB lighting at the front, or it should if I wire it up correctly, and better yet, the motherboard standoffs have already been installed. Now you may be wondering, is that a tempered glass side panel? Well, sorry to disappoint you, but it is not. This is a pretty cheap case. I bought it because it was quite cheap, it suits a tighter budget, and to be honest there's certainly enough space in here. I do like bottom mounted PSUs as well, and this little bottom section will help hide someone's messy cable management. I'm talking about my messy cable management. Now it's also worth allocating a small part of your PC building budget to case fans. How many you get is entirely up to you, but I would recommend at least 2, one for an intake fan and one for an exhaust. 3 or 4 would be ideal, but of course make sure you have the correct amount of motherboard connectors to handle any fans that you buy. Some fans may hook up via Molex connectors as well. Now, I didn't convert the prices into dollars or euros today. This is more of a comprehensive parts list. I guess from this you should be able to tell how these parts perform together, and hopefully it will help you decide whether you want to build something similar with AMD's new Ryzen 5 1600 chip, and whether or not it's worth it once you've taken into consideration the price of components where you live. Now it was time to check if the PC was working, and of course test the most important factor. There we are, working as they should be. I'm not usually a fan of RGB, to be honest. This is sort of subtle, I guess you could say, so I don't mind it, plus you can always turn it off as well. Now, should you want to, the Ryzen 5 1600 AF is also now just as overclockable as the 2600, considering it's pretty much the same thing, just a little slower at stock, and because of this it will perform very closely to the 2600 in CPU intensive tasks. If you've seen a 2600 review, well, you pretty much should know what to expect here. The 1600 AF makes some great improvements over the original, and that's more apparent when we move on to the gaming tests right now, though I'll have a little more of a detailed comparison later in the week to compare both the original chip and this one directly. Now, this machine is good for high settings across the board for an average of 60 FPS in most cases. I put Red Dead Redemption 2 to the test first because it's actually the most demanding of all of today's games. As you can see, with a mix of high and medium settings, it came quite close-ish at around the mid-50s. This will drop a little more in busier areas such as Valentine, for example, but overall it was a pretty decent experience. Now, you can change all of the settings to medium or select one of the performance presets and likely see an average of 60 across the board, but I prefer a nice combination of graphical quality and performance, and I think in most parts of the map you'll get that with these settings. As you venture out into the wilderness, the performance picks up, but it's totally up to you as to how you play. So as I throw up some more gameplay for you here, I just want to talk about something interesting I found. Now, I did test the games with 8 gigs of RAM as well before I put the 16 gigabytes of RAM results up on screen, and what I found is that the performance in AAA titles wasn't actually much different, to be honest. I think the GTX 1650 is the main limiting factor here. It's a great card, the 1650 Super, a great budget card, but there is definitely room for improvement with a processor like this. You could certainly opt for something more capable should your budget allow it. I went with the card because I feel like for the money, it's a very capable GPU if you want to stick under £500 or dollars or whatever, but there is certainly room for something more powerful to be paired with it. As you can see though, in the top left corner, we do exceed 8 gigs of RAM usage in every title, and it's nice to have 16 just in case you decide you want to do a little bit of content creation, video editing, things like that, because when it comes to tasks like Premiere Pro, you'll notice a difference between 8 and 16 gigabytes. Plus, we don't really know what sort of games are going to come out this year for PC, how demanding they're going to be, but I can assure you that they'll probably need quite a bit of memory. Kingdom Come Deliverance, for example, came out in 2018, correct me if I'm wrong, and that still likes a lot of memory. You know, Battlefield 5 is the same, so it's just good to have 16 gigs in case. Plus, it isn't that much more expensive. If you're working with a stricter budget, then 8 gigs will probably do you fine, but if you can go for it, go for 16. It's nice to have a little bit of wiggle room, so to speak, and then you'll probably only need to upgrade the graphics card before anything else. The CPU though, well, you can see how low the usage is in a lot of instances. It still holds up very well, and the 1600 AF more so than the original 6-core chip. What you'll see though is that this combination is certainly good for 1080p 60 frames per second gaming. Granted, there are a couple of titles like Red Dead Redemption 2 that we tested at the very start that will struggle to achieve this, but should you turn most things down to medium with a combination of high, then 60 FPS should be doable. Red Dead Redemption 2 is just probably one of the most demanding games that I've ever tried to run on any system, and it takes some serious horsepower in order to get a smooth experience. Other games like Metro Exodus and Kingdom Come Deliverance, for example, two excellent examples of graphically impressive games that are quite recent, do perform rather well and will exceed 60 frames per second. The 1650 Super and the Ryzen 5 1600 AF, along with 16 gigs of RAM, make for a good pairing. Does pairing make sense if you're talking about 3 components? I'm going to say it does. Yeah. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I want to do a few more comparisons with the Ryzen 5 1600 AF compared to the original Ryzen 5 1600. I believe Hardware Unboxed released a video today. Gamers Nexus have a video out already. They're both definitely worth checking out, but I always like to do my own tests, experiment a bit, see what happens, and hopefully you can join me then. But as for now, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it, leave a dislike if you didn't. I really do feel like this is a pretty decent budget build if you have around £450 to spend. Subscribe to the channel, by the way, if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one, where I have some pretty sad news to discuss.